Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Wednesday, October 28th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast, more polls coming in. Of course, this is in relation to the final week, the final countdown for the presidential election on the 3rd of November. So a couple polls and articles we want to get to through today's podcast. A little bit of some interesting data came through over the weekend, and we imagined that was going to be the case. And then over the coming days, we imagine more polls to come in. And again, at this juncture, we're not so much concerned with the national polls as we are concerned with the state polls, especially those battleground states. That's where we want to focus our attention, because by every measure, Joe Biden has a pretty solid lead if the election were held today. This seems to be pretty much an agreement across the board, but that does not mean that Donald Trump is out for the count, not by any stretch of the imagination. He still has a possibility of winning. He has a few avenues to that ever-important 270 figure for the Electoral College votes that, of course, he or Joe Biden needs to win the presidency. So market performance, we're going to get to a couple articles out of 538.com that goes over some of these incoming polls. Of course, we'll do the daily early vote count update. And then, of course, the Real Clear Politics Electoral College map will give their analysis as well. And then, as many of you are aware, European Lockdown 2.0. So we have Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany, the largest economy in Europe, announcing that there is going to be at least a 1-month lockdown of social gatherings. So pretty much your bars, your clubs, your restaurants, your theaters, your movie theaters, what have you, shut down for a month. This is going to devastate their economies once again. This has led to another big sell-off across the board on Wall Street and with the European exchanges and in Asia. I mean, this is across the board. This is basically shutdown, lockdown 2.0 globally. Rising cases of COVID-19 and hospitalizations across Europe. Same here in the United States, unfortunately. We are not rounding the bend, turning the corner, whatever the president of the United States wants to claim. I mean, he's been making this claim for several months. You can say it as many times as you want. It's just not going to make it so. We all wish that was the case. We don't want to be in a pandemic. We don't want to have our businesses shut down. We don't want to remain in our homes for longer than we have to. We just don't want to be in this situation. But unfortunately, we are here. So this is having huge implications, ramifications, and they're pretty much all negative. And because this is dealing directly with people's lives and livelihoods, you're seeing people taking to the streets, protesting these lockdowns once again. And I agree, rightly so, because this is just another prime example of government overreach with their power, because they're picking winners and losers, ladies and gentlemen. That is ultimately the problem here, one of many. But that's a big one that really sticks with me, really bothers me. Because you can be a small business and you can offer the same goods and service of a larger business. But that larger company, that big box store, whatever it might be, is deemed essential. But you as a small business owner, you're considered non-essential, so you got to lock down. You got to shut down. Well, that's going to put you out of business if it hasn't already. And with, Nobody Cares Act 2.0, at least on the back burner, we know through various surveys that we have covered here over the past weeks and months that without further assistance from the government, a significant portion of other small businesses are just going to close the door for good. Now, I'm not advocating for further bailouts. I didn't want the first one. I'm on record well before this crap even came down the pike for the Congress not to do this. But when you're going to bail out major banks, when you're going to bail out major corporations around the world, mind you, these are not just U.S. companies. that the U.S. taxpayer is bailing out, either directly from Congress or indirectly through the Federal Reserve, which of course is backstopped by the taxpayer. Don't forget that piece of the pie either. Very important nugget. They can bail out the bigs. Why can't they assist the small businesses, the mom and pop shops? Well, we sort of know the answer to that, don't we? Despite the fact that we are bailing out the banks to give them money to help assist smaller businesses, say, well, we're not going to do it. And why aren't they going to do it? Well, one of the reasons that they are citing is the unfortunate fact, but something that we have been discussing here for over a year, is the fact that so many companies, no matter their size, qualify to be classified as zombie corporations. Small, mid, large, doesn't matter. It means they have too much debt. It means they weren't running very efficiently before COVID-19. Now with all the added uncertainty, with all the debt that's already on their balance sheets, the banks are saying we're not giving them money because the banks know something. And it's common sense. They're not going to make it. These businesses are not going to survive. This is what quantitative easing has given us over the past decade plus, the past 12 years and counting. This is what money printing gets us. You understand this? A lot of you do, and a lot of you don't. I don't know how much more carnage you need to see before you wake up and understand what's going on before your very eyes. This system is corrupt to its core. They're picking winners and losers right in front of your face. But I guess as long as you get $1,200 or an extra $600 a week, you'll sit down and shut up. That's what's going on here. You've been bought off for a measly $1,200 or an extra $600 a week for several weeks. And to a lot of people, that makes a big difference. So I guess it is incentive for a lot of people, unfortunately, to sit down and shut up despite what's going on around them, despite what this is doing to the heart and soul at any expense. People don't care. As long as it's good for them, at any expense, it doesn't matter, which is a huge problem, not only facing this country, but many around the world. It is a lack of leadership across the board. That's why we see protests across the board, big protests in Nigeria. I'm sure many of you are aware of. Those are not going to die down anytime soon. And they're going to pick up elsewhere too, folks. 2021 is going to be worse than 2020 because none of these issues have been solved. And they're not even being truly addressed by either presidential candidate or by either of the major political parties. Now, why do you think that is? You know why that is. Because there's not much difference between them. It's really one party system. And they're not going to tell you the truth. They're not going to tell you the game is over, that we've lived too far beyond our means for too long, and the piper needs paid. That discussion is not going to happen with you. They claim that they want to help the people. Nancy Pelosi, oh, we got to feed them. We got to feed them. We got to help them, the people. The little peons, right? Donald Trump, we got to help the people. I don't care about crazy Nancy. All she wants to do is bail out poorly run Democratic cities and have a deal. Why is there no deal for the people? Should be simple if everybody wants it. If Donald Trump claims that the Republicans will get on board with him, even if it's $1 trillion, $2 trillion, then why don't we have it? Why do these businesses have to suffer now? Why do the people have to continue to suffer if they're so concerned about the little guy? Well, doesn't this tell you that they're not concerned about, because this is what you're going to get, whether it's 4 more years, whether it's 4 years of Joe Biden. You're going to get the same crap. That's all it is. Maybe you just prefer a different. Trump will give you this appetizer, Biden will give you that one. That's all the difference is. It's a joke. How much more do you need to see? Clearly, some of you see it. Clearly, some of you don't. But that's how it goes. Market performance, a big down day across the board. Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, I think, gave back over 3%, pretty much the same across the board. The dollar strengthened, however, overnight. We're seeing a little bit of a decline in the dollar index, but ever so slightly, trading at 93.344. And conversely, a little bit of strength in the euro and the British pound against the U.S. dollar. Overnight futures trading a little bit of a bounce back for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, gaining 1.3%. S&P 500 up 1.5%, and the NASDAQ 100 up 1.5% as well at the time of this podcast. In the red slightly for the Japanese cash trade, down 0.4%. Another big sell-off across the pond. The UK market's giving back 2.5 percentage points. The German market's giving back 4.17%. French market's down 3 1/3. Italian market's giving back 4%. And the Spanish market's giving back about 2.7%. Also, a big sell-off in Australia, down 1.5%. Same story rings true with some of the bigger stocks. Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and Facebook, all giving back anywhere from about 3.8% down to 5.5%, depending on the stock. So a big down day. Now that's something you got to pay attention to, too, with these big players, because these guys, these 5, 6, 7 stocks have been the quote-unquote stock market. That's it. A handful of stocks, which if you add them up with their market cap, would be one of the largest countries on the planet if you equated their market cap to GDP. This is what has been leading these markets higher. What typically leads you higher is what leads you lower. So when this bubble bursts, and it will, I just don't know when, but when it does, it's these stocks that are going to bring the house of cards down with it. This is just what happens, folks. This is just the nature of the beast. But as long as it keeps going up, people don't care at what expense until it all goes down. Then they're going to care. Big sell-off across the board in commodities, too, especially oil. WTI trading at $37.60. Brent at $39.24. Natural gas, a big upswing here, $3.30. Gold and silver, despite sort of hanging on over the past couple of days, sold off big time today. Gold is at $1,884 an ounce, well below that $1,900 an ounce threshold. And silver gave back 4, almost 5 percentage points, and is now trading at $23.50 an ounce. Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is yielding 0.79%. That rounds it out. Let's get to today's early vote count. 76.5 million. 76.5 million votes. That is quite the increase from yesterday's podcast, where I think we were at, 71.5? Something like that. So a big upswing there. Early voting. In-person votes accounts for 25.8 million. Mail ballots returned accounts for 50.7 million. And then according to the election project here, where we're getting this data again out of the University of Florida, outstanding mail ballots accounts for about 41 million. So that's interesting that there are that many outstanding mail-in ballots, 41.2 million outstanding. But there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of the in-person voting is in lieu of that, because people just feel, you know what? Yes, I requested the ballot. Yes, I have it. Yes, I can fill it out. But I don't trust the mail. I don't like how Donald Trump is speaking about these mail-in ballots. So I'm going to wait in line, no matter how long that might be, and I'm going to vote in person. Again, that in-person vote total is 25.8, and outstanding mail-in ballots is at 41.2. So even if you were to assume that was somewhat the case, and 100% of the in-person voting also has a mail-in vote, or at least the ballot, I should say, that still leaves you with 16 million outstanding mail ballots. You get what I'm saying? There would still be over 10 million people, 16 million votes out there that are going to have to either come in through the mail, or it's going to have to take place in in-person voting, either early voting or on the 3rd of November. So we will continue to keep you monitored on that. As a percentage of the 2016 total turnout, We're now at 55.5%. So even if we get to what some political analysts are claiming is going to be 150 to 160 million votes in 2020, we're already halfway there at the 150 mark, since we're already at 75 or 76.5 million votes. Now, as a percentage, again, 55.5 of the 2016 turnout. State of Texas, 91% is already in the books as a percentage of 2016 turnout. 91%. State of Arizona, battleground state, is at 74.5. Nevada's at 71. Florida's at 72. Georgia's at 77. North Carolina's at 76%. Pennsylvania at 32. Ohio at 44. Michigan at 48. Wisconsin 52. Minnesota 40. Iowa 51.5. So those are some of your battleground states. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this trend continues throughout the week, which it's going to. It could be an early election night on the 3rd of November, or at least get some results on the 4th. So unless it's very close, we're probably going to know. But we're going to know for certain in a few short days. Again, if we go to Real Clear Politics here, just to get this out of the way, just to see if there's any change from yesterday's podcast, the answer is no. With respect to Real Clear Politics analysis, with respect to the Electoral College, yesterday Joe Biden had 311 Electoral College votes, and last night Donald Trump had 227. That remains unchanged, the same figures for today. So if that changes, of course, we'll keep you updated, and I plan on doing so throughout the remainder of this week and until Election Day, because new polls are coming in, new analysis is being conducted, but not much change with respect to Real Clear Politics. In fact, no change. Now to 538 and a couple articles here, titled, What to Make of That New Wisconsin Poll That Has Biden Way Ahead. I'm sure some of you are aware of this, the ABC Washington Post poll, so we're going to get to that. That's what the analysts here at 538 want to discuss. I think this might be helpful. So here we go. Once in a blue moon, you see a poll that makes you blink twice to make sure you're not seeing things. This morning's ABC News, the Washington Post survey of Wisconsin, was just such a poll. It showed Joe Biden 17 points, not a typo, ahead of President Trump, 57% to 40% among likely voters. To put it mildly, this is a stunning margin in what is supposed to be one of the most competitive swing states in the country, a place that Trump carried by less than 1 percentage point in 2016. And this is not an easy poll to disregard. ABC News Washington Post adheres to what we consider the gold standard methodology, meaning they use live phone interviewers, call cell phones as well as landlines, and participate in the American Association for Public Opinion Research's Transparency Initiative, or the Roper Center for Public Opinion Research Archive, and earns an A-plus grade in the 538's pollsters rating database. The poll single-handedly increased Biden's lead in our polling average of Wisconsin from 7.1 points to 9 points even, and it is currently the most influential poll in our forecast of Wisconsin, where Biden's chances of winning the state have reached a new high as a result, 93 out of 100. So what 538 is mentioning here is that they rank their polls, they grade them. A plus, A minus, A, they'll give you an A/B, whatever. And they have their methodology as to why they give their different grading system, okay? Why they give a different grade to different polls. That's what this author of this article is trying to explain. That, yes, this is seemingly an outlier, 17 points, but this is from one of their A-plus pollsters, okay? So that's something to pay attention to. Is this just an outlier, or is this going to be actually what pans out? We're going to find out. But that's sort of what how 538 comes up with their methodology. And of course, they break down these polls. They give them different weights. So that's going to have an effect on their forecasts. Continuing, we have that said, ABC News Washington Post is definitely an outlier. No other poll has shown Biden with that large a lead in Wisconsin since June. Back then, it was Hodis and Associates poll sponsored by the conservative Restoration PAC that put Biden 17 points ahead. On the other hand, this poll doesn't exactly exist in a vacuum. Biden has recently gotten a lot of very strong polls from some of the states that border Wisconsin. To wit, Rabo Research was out with a poll yesterday showing Biden at 50% and Trump at 46% in the state of Iowa. Last week, the A-plus pollsters, Monmouth University and Siena College, the New York Times Upshot, found similar margins. Iowa, remember, is a fairly red state that Trump carried by 9 points in 2016. And for the first time, our forecast now gives Biden a better chance than Trump of winning the state. Although it's still basically a coin flip, Biden's odds are 51 in 100. Yesterday, Gravis Marketing released a survey of Minnesota in which Biden led Trump by 14 points. Biden's chances of winning Minnesota have now reached an all-time high of 94 in 100. On Sunday, we also got a Gravis poll of Michigan that gave Biden a 13-point lead. That's on top of last week's Fox News poll of Michigan showing Biden with a 12-point advantage. And this morning, ABC News Washington Post also released a Michigan poll giving Biden a smaller 7-point lead. Overall, our forecast gives Biden a 94 in 100 chance of winning the Wolverine state. What might be going on here? Well, Biden has led in some of these states for a while. But it's also possible that Trump could be losing support in the Midwest due to the recent spike in COVID-19 cases there. Much of Wisconsin is currently a hot spot. On Tuesday, the state reported more new cases, 5,300 about, and deaths at 64 than any other day of the pandemic. The same day, Iowa and Minnesota announced a record number of hospitalizations, and cases are on the rise in Michigan as well. Nationally, the coronavirus is a losing issue for Trump. 58% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the pandemic on average, compared with just 40% who approve. This is basically Trump's base. The high 30s, low 40s, that's pretty much always Trump's base. It doesn't matter what he does. He is always getting their approval. And Wisconsin is no different. According to ABC News Washington Post, Trump's net disapproval rating on his handling of the coronavirus in Wisconsin is negative 20 percentage points. Double what it was in mid-September. That's huge. And 63% of registered voters there in Wisconsin say they are worried about catching COVID-19. What's more, Biden leads by a whopping 75% to 22% among members of this bloc who say they are likely to vote. As recently as Saturday, Trump said at a rally in the Milwaukee suburbs that the pandemic was winding down. But that's clearly not the case in Wisconsin or in these other Midwestern states that Trump probably needs in order to win re-election. There's almost a 20% chance that one of Wisconsin, Michigan, or Minnesota will provide the decisive electoral vote. And Trump has a less than 1 in 100 chance of winning if he fails to carry Iowa. The surge of illness in the region is obviously bad news, first and foremost for the impact it has on people's lives. But for an incumbent president, widely seen as having failed on the issue of the pandemic and facing re-election in less than 1 week, it's also terrible timing politically, and ain't that the truth? And of course, a president who clings to the stock market and uses the stock market as a barometer for his success, well, that's not going into the direction you would think the president wants this week either. Or is it? Does the president want to win? Or does he want to lose? Does he really want to go through all of this again, potentially? Maybe he wants to go back to Mar-a-Lago. Maybe he wants to go back to Fifth Avenue. But he would never admit that outright. But some of his actions, some of his rhetoric really shows maybe that is what he wants. I'm just throwing that out there. Because I think it's a legitimate question. I mean, he hates losing, but does he love what he's doing? Does he want to spend the next 4 years? I mean, he's up there in age. You know, who knows? Maybe he'll live to be 100. God bless him. Maybe he doesn't. Does he want to spend the next 4 years in this type of situation again? I don't know. But that doesn't matter. He could still win. Regardless of what he actually wants, becomes irrelevant. If the American people vote for him again, enough numbers, he gets 270. Hey, he's reelected. But the president is hurting himself, obviously, with how he is handling COVID-19. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, listen to the president, with respect to hearing what they wanted to hear when it comes to COVID-19. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Well, I don't want to wear a mask, so I'm not going to. Social distance, don't social distance. I don't want to, so I'm not. I'm going to go out here and there. And, unfortunately, people are getting sick. And it's not them. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's their mother. Maybe it's their spouse. Maybe it's their child. Maybe it's a grandparent. And now it's getting real. Because before it was just on TV. It wasn't any big deal. Don't worry about it. It's a hoax. The media is playing it up. COVID, COVID, COVID. And people bought into it. Because they don't want to be in the midst of a pandemic. Understandably so. But we are, unfortunately. So unfortunately for a lot of people, they had to get it or see it in a loved one to maybe get the wake-up call. And if these polls are correct, then that's apparently what's going on here. Because as we see this spike in cases in some of these Midwestern states especially, you're seeing a bigger uptick for the support of Joe Biden and higher disapprovals for Donald Trump. This is just something that was out of his wheelhouse. He did the right thing in setting up a task force early on, but he hogged the airwaves. You want to put Pence in charge of it? Let Pence run it. Let the doctors, let the scientists, let them learn about this pandemic. Let them learn about this specific strain of coronavirus. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Had to come out, hog up the airwaves. Had to ramble and mumble on for an hour, 2 hours, several months ago, claiming to be a wartime president. Well, the war isn't over. The invisible enemy's still here. But he's tired of it. And so I guess he's waving the white flag. Just get used to it. That's not leadership. It's unacceptable. How people can vote for it is beyond me. But it's going to happen. I mean, people are definitely going to vote for him. The question is, will he win again? He definitely can. He definitely can. But it just really, it really blows my mind. At this juncture, with his rhetoric, the divisiveness, and just everything else that's going on. Like I said, like I've asked before, what type of divided government would you rather have? Would you rather have Trump as the president and the Democrats in control of both houses, or would you rather have Biden as president and the Republicans in control of both houses? I don't necessarily know if either one of those scenarios is going to happen. I think a blue wave, unfortunately, is most likely going to happen. But we'll see. We will see. I mean, God help us regardless of who's in there, because neither of these idiots know what they're doing. And it's unfortunate because we're all the collateral damage. Plus, we have to pay for the carnage. Ain't that great? So there you have it, folks. Some updates. 76.5 million early votes. Unbelievable. And that number is going to go up over the next few days for certain. So there you have it. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.